was sure by now, God, you would have reached down and wiped our tears away.
You recall yesterday when we saw the model of Jerusalem, we were looking down from the top, meaning towards the east. We were looking at a gate which was called the Sheep's Gate, and then right up to the left would have been a pool called the Sheep's Pool, remember? And to the right of that, the double pool. Now, had you walked straight up that street, that would have led you to the Antonia Fortress, which is in the northwestern corner of the Temple Mount area. If you look very closely, they drew this in for you, but you can see inside over here, pavement stones. Do you see that pavement stone and everything? Okay, now where are we right now? We are right in the area of the Antonia Fortress. Antonia Fortress, nothing exists today. As a matter of fact, zero exists today. The only thing that exists are some of the pavement stone, which are still downstairs in the basement of this building. This building is called the Sisters of Zion. It's built over the area where once was the Antonia Fortress. Now, the original Antonia Fortress, where Christ was, let's say, condemned by Pontius Pilate, was totally destroyed in the fighting against the Jews in the year 70 AD. It was demined by the Zealots. It collapsed. The Romans reused all the stones as a ramp to attack the Temple Mount. And then only in the year 135, which is like 65 years after the destruction of the Temple, during the second revolt against Rome, Hadrian rebuilds the Antonia Fortress, and he reuses some of the pavement stone downstairs. So therefore, when we go downstairs, you will still see some of the reused pavement stone from the original Antonia Fortress. Now, the Antonia Fortress was built by King Herod the Great, so that the Roman soldiers would not have to walk around on the Temple Mount itself, because it sort of agitated the people there. So therefore, they built this fortress to overlook what's going on top of the Temple Mount, and it's named after Mark Antony. Herod and Mark were really close friends. Okay? Alright, so, although when we go downstairs, it gives you the impression of like being in a dungeon because of the low ceilings and the domes and all that. It's not. This is a fairly modern building. 100 years old maybe, 120, that's all it is. But they've retained some of the original pavement stone downstairs, which means there's a very, very good possibility that some of the stones that we see downstairs could very well have been the stones that Christ walked upon while he was being interrogated here, and then later on when he was given the crossbeam and sent out to walk. Which means that although this street known today as the Via della Rosa, the routing of that street could very well be correct. We're not at the same ground level as it was 2,000 years ago. Ground level today is 20 feet high. So if you take a look at the walls and the streets and say, oh wow, it looks so ancient, 150 years, maybe. The street since 1967, because it's repaid by the Israeli government. The walk is very important for different denominations in the Christian world because they want to see something substantial that's talked about in Scripture. So about 400 or 500 years ago, the Catholic Church put together a dedication walk, which was called the Via della Rosa, with 14 stations. I don't go by historians, I don't go by legend. I open up Scripture, what it says is law to me, that's it. If it doesn't say anything to me about 14 stations of the cross, then there weren't. It mentions incidences that occurred while Christ had the cross and his walk into Calvary. That's the only thing I abide by. So if I'm stepping on anyone's toes, I don't care. All right. Anyway, so that's why we're here. Because I want to show you some of the original pavement stone from that period of time. That is two very distinctive types of stone. There's the stone that's very smooth, which means that it's an interior stone inside of a courtyard, because there was a courtyard here, all right? And then there's stones that would be as pavement stones in the street. All those stones had grooves or niches carved into them to give you some sort of friction. Because during the early mornings, you've noticed, either when it's raining or when the dew comes, that stone can become very slippery. So that's why they have the niches. Downstairs, they're showing you both. Look, I'm not going to tell you that it's the exact stone, but when Christ was condemned and given the crossbeam to walk to Calvary, he would have had to have walked upon street stones which had the ridges on them. You'll see both downstairs.